A prophet is not without honor, except in his own country, among his own relatives, and in his own house. Mark chapter 6. We are St. Paul Lutheran Church, spa15.org. You can find the sermons there. UAC, that means Unaltered Augsburg Confession. That means the real Lutherans. That's why we're in the LCMS. That's the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, to be very distinguished from the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America that believes in all sorts of other things. But let's just say they don't feel as strongly about the Bible being true the way we do, as we do. And so we are the pro grace, pro Bible, pro marriage, pro family, pro life Lutherans. And here at St. Paul, we're also pretty convicted that Psalms praying, Proverbs reading, red letter following changes your life. We're also well aware that Lutheran just means free Catholic, which is all the Protestants who are really still following Jesus and not rejecting the fact that there's one church on earth. We are part of that one church. This building, St. Paul Lutheran Church, is a chapel where we, the church as a congregation, are a part of the eternal single church of God, who are all people who believe in Jesus Christ. You are set apart for discipleship and giving by this God. And here we have committed ourselves, I've committed to making you a Bible reading people, that you know what you believe and why you believe it, so you can be the reformation, regeneration, and inspiration of the whole wide world wherever your feet go. Mark 6 is going to put that world in a framework if you'll let it. The power of Mark is not to compare it to Matthew and Luke, which is what most scholars did for 200 years, and they just kind of missed it. And they spent most of their time instead arguing about Q, which doesn't even exist and has nothing to do with Donald Trump, if you can believe it. What a world we live in. But really, Q was a big deal long before Q was a big deal. And I guess I could throw in, if you're a Star Trek fan, there's a Q there as well. Q was a falsified, non existent document that scholars believed had to exist so that Matthew and Luke could be written because Mark is so bad. I'm shortening it a bit there, but really, that's the summary. And we should leave all of that garbage far in the dust of Western civilization's ashes, I think, and recover Mark as the most stellar masterpiece that maybe exists among the Gospels. And that's overstating the case. There's four of them, and they're all inspired and without error. But Mark's doing it his own way. And kind of the best shorthand for how he does it is he tells you so much less and so much more at the exact same time. He has a shorter book with fewer stories, and every story is a little longer and is filled with words that are sufficient to make you a theologian if you just pay attention to them one at a time. You can learn God's mind from Mark. And I'm going to try to show you that a little bit here through Jesus and then how this plays out in the story about him. First, I'm going to overview the text. It's 6 verses. It's a short story, but so much happens in 6 verses. So I'm going to overview the story and try to summarize those verses, pretty succinctly. And then we're going to get into some of these terms that are in the story and how they create a way of thinking or a mindset, or you could just call it a belief. Yeah. Uh, we're going to look at those terms, and that is the Word of God, and that will inspire you to the lesson, which I'll try to draw from the whole thing. Okay. So let's start with, though. I mean, here's the story of Mark 6. Yeah. Jesus has been like out cleaning house. That's like what he's doing. He's cleaning house. And now he comes to his own house. He comes to his own village. He comes to his own place, and he's coming like a champ. I mean, this guy went away a carpenter, and he came back having won the college bowl game. There should be a part. There is a party. There's a parade. Just he walks in, and he's got people following him. So, verse 1 is Jesus is coming hometown like a champ. And 6 verse 2 is quite long. Basically, they ask for cred, which is the weirdest thing you do to someone coming home with a ring on their finger from winning the game. Like, yeah, but Aren't you born from the wrong people? Something like that. And we're going to dig into those words because there's so much going on in who and why and how they ask these questions. But again, they demand cred from Jesus, even though he's got it like all around him and the people following him and the miracles he's been doing. Uh, and then they accuse him, verse 3, by means of his family. Now, in classic logic, that's called an ad hominem, name calling on the playground, right? Like, hey, your shoe's untied. You should tie it. Well, you're a pencil neck. And then, he ignores you. That's called an ad hominem. And it's not logical, but people do it all the time, long after the playground. They say Hitler or Trump or Biden, and then nobody has to talk anymore or think. Ad hominem, name calling, is not reasonable. It's what they do to him. And then in verse 4, that's the quote, the red letters, like Jesus breaks it down. He's like, okay, y'all said a bunch, but here's what's happening. And then we kind of hear about the result of this, verse 5, which is that Jesus does not clean house. So go from verse 1 to verse 5. Jesus comes home having cleaned house everywhere and does not clean house. It even will say he can't. And people will get in arguments about how can the Son of God can't, right? Oh, yeah. Words are powerful. The point is that, like, it just wasn't there. There was no belief there. Those who should have understood him less. And you can certainly see in this the foreshadowing of Jerusalem's rejection of him and, can I say, the new wineskins of Christianity leaving behind the old wineskins of the synagogue. That's all at play in this, although it's not up on the surface, but it's there. Mark's pushing in that direction pretty hard. So Jesus does not clean house. He's going to clean outside of the house, right? And then he does that, and yet he creates a new house. And so the last verse, verse 6, we're going to look at kind of closely because it has three power words in it that tell us about how Jesus runs his churches. And these aren't congregations with buildings, these aren't church bodies, these are people who gather to hear him talk when he shows up again. And in just one verse, there's three words about how he does it. And it's brilliant because you can look at our church body, you can kind of see how we kind of do that. And you can look at any other organization. You can say, oh, yeah, you actually kind of have to organize this way somehow if you want people to follow you. So there's great wisdom in every piece of this language, but then also see how that wisdom is there because he is who he says he is. He is the man who is God. And again, he is the God of war, rightfully very upset with our planet, having come to earth as a man of peace in order to deal with it his way. And from here, his way is to make you the new Israel, not by means of a hierarchical chain of bloodline inheritances, but by a spirit of wisdom poured out through words that can never perish or pass away. The red letters being, I think, places to start if you want to cut through the threads of whatever seems to be muddled in your world. Because Jesus' words work everywhere. Even if you've never had a sheep, you know what it means when he talks about sheep and shepherds. Doesn't take much. You know what a seed is, even if you've never really grown one. So Jesus is filled with clarity. We'll get there then in verse 4. But now clarity is what Mark is after. So almost every single word in this pericope is a fancy way of saying section. Almost every single word in this section is like a vocabulary word. Like we could have like a vocabulary list where they're all in bold at the front and it says what it means. And if you looked at that list, you'd be like, wow, this is like the history of Israel and how to understand your family. That's kind of strange to have a vocab list like that just laid out, but that's exactly what it is. And in this, I mean, this is sort of like the cherry on top today. Is that all of this? You have this marvelous moment where if you want to believe in the perpetual virginity of Mary, which all Roman Catholics have to, and which some Lutherans want to, this text is your greatest challenge by a big, big, big piece. And it's beautiful, actually. If you consider what the Bible tells you the Holy Family actually was. Uh, and we have a church in town called Holy Family. You can see a picture of the Holy Family. There's three of them. That's not what the Bible says at all. Uh, so getting into that nugget, that's the cherry on top. Through this lectionary dictionary set of words about how to be a Bible reader with a New Testament understanding, well, let's kind of look at some of these words. I'm going to give you three sets of three that run through it that will give you three different comparisons, kind of like when I say to know wisdom and discipline by comparing the word knowledge and the word wisdom and the word discipline. Even if in the moment you do it, you're like, that's confusing. Yeah, you just got wiser. That's how you get wiser, is you get confused. And then you're confused. And that's wisdom. Knowledge is when you know, wisdom is when you kind of know you don't know. Right? Discipline is what you do because you don't know. And understanding is what people say you have since you avoided all the bad stuff that way. Yeah. And again, this is Proverbs 1 2a, our theme verse for the year. But similarly, Mark is doing this with words. And so here are three of the sets of words. We'll go in the reverse order since I mentioned one already. Mark 6:6. Jesus goes from homos to komos in a kuklo, daskonin. Okay. So a komos, a kuklo, and a didascon. I'm going to translate these now. It's a town, a circuit, and teaching. But now it's not quite right because in the Greek, the words are more gradual or graded than that. So it's not a circuit, it's the word circle. It's just the word circle. If you want to understand it's a circuit, like we have circuits in the LCMS, you can, but our circuits aren't circles at all. And that's not what this is saying either, but it is. It's saying that to go in a roundabout loop is a circle. Jesus went about in circles. That's what it says. In circles from komos to komos, which you can translate it as a village if you want, but if you can hear that it's the root of the word community, komos, community, from commune to commune, from village to village, you can see the link between communism historically and Judaism right there. It does, in fact, exist. And you can see that it's not all bad to have groups of people gathered together with stuff in common, because the word common is the root of the word communion in komos. So we went from commonplace to commonplace in a circle teaching. And throughout Mark, this is what Jesus is saying he's here to do. They come for him to heal. He says, I want to teach. And his teaching isn't just sort of like tut, 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 touch. It is open your eyes, see your life, live it in freedom. And the people who hear from him, how do. That's pulling in crowds like no one else, including pagans, tax collectors, prostitutes, all the rest. But again, he moves on, he moves on. He doesn't stay with these congregations, these komoses, these towns. And this is where, again, it becomes very valuable to hear we have towns as Christians. They're called congregations. Some towns are cities, some towns are villages, but we have lots of them. They're all over. We're in disagreement, they're tribal, we're at war, and the Roman Catholics think they're the only ones. They really do still kind of think that. No one else really thinks that anymore, but they do. But they're all the towns of Jesus congregations, communions. Again, the word communion, even sitting right there with komos. And then these towns exist in Jesus' mind as a circle. It's a gathered group, his flock, by which he shepherds them. And it doesn't have to be perfectly rounded in circumference for us to see that indeed that's what our church body, our organization has attempted to do with us as congregations, as towns, is to gather us into circles that can come together. We do have these things, they're called circuits or winkles. How effective they are now, how healthy they are, it depends on your region, I think. Which makes sense. That'd be its own kind of circle. So in these circles and circles and circles, things get bigger, and that's how all authority tends to work, binding the common to the whole. Jesus does it by never changing what he says. So no matter what circle, what level, what people Jesus goes to, he goes with one message. And what is that? It's the red letters. It is the red letters. It's not the doctrine of justification, although that is a particularly glorious light that we must defend to the death. But it's the red letters that will endure forever. They are the path to wisdom beyond line upon line, precept upon precept. That's his teaching. That's that word didaskon. So when the early church is really concerned about baptize and teach, and when they write an early book gathered together and they call it the didaskalos, it's because they're listening to these words. They're using these words. And I believe so much in the power of these words that I believe you cannot believe in Jesus. Listen to me, learn how to talk, use these words, and be wiser with God's fruit in your life without being saved. I don't think that's good. I just think that's how good God is. I want us all to be converted to believing He wants us to see it, to know it, and even, yes, to feel it, which is a good place to bring up His family. Because that's one of these other sets of words that gets brought in here. I got to find it all. There's so many of them. There they are. And this is less about, say, well, hold on. I'm going to back up. The second set of three, not his family, but it is his family, is the three places that Jesus in Mark 6, verse 4 will talk about being rejected. And one of them is mentioned already in verse 1. In verse 1, it says, he went out from there and came to his own country, it says. It's one word in the Greek. It is the word patride, patride. And we get all sorts of stuff from this word, like patronize, which is a bad word, even though, well, I guess patriarchs become a bad word too, right? And yet Patreon is where you go to make money, I guess, you know? So it is the word father. And this is where, if you were to put this in real English, like I'm going to be as literal as I can and as English as I can, it's the word fatherland. Very evidently, it can't be any word but. He went to the fatherland, his fatherland. And I'll let you ask, why isn't it translated that way in any of the historical ways we've looked at this in the West? What is sick about our people? And I don't think it's hard to see anymore. Is the United States your fatherland? It's a worthy question. Jesus went to his, is the point. Do we have one? It's a question. Jesus went to his, is the point. And in his, he ran into a bunch of others who are called his, I think it's relatives here. Let's see. It's a prophet is not without honor except in his own country among his own relatives. And that word Stug Genusin, I'm going to come back to, but those relatives have been mentioned in the text, right? So here he is, he's coming in, he's got a huge crowd, and they get a little upset about him. That's our other three. And they start talking about all of his relatives and how Mary and Joseph are, is just a carpenter, not a rabbi. Why is he teaching? And then, like, James and Jude and Joseph and Simon are all still like down the street. And like, that's his sister, and that's his sister. And they say all that. Oh, goodness, it's so good. But I'm going to keep backing up, and then we're going to kind of run through it to the end, to the three that comes before this. Okay. So we got the three of Jesus teaching the community in a circle. We got the three of the fatherland, his relatives, and his house. Right. We're opening these boxes. We're going to go all the way back now to the three of how they are amazed, how they are offended, and how he marvels. Okay. And then from there, we're going to try to close this back up. So I hope that doesn't feel too scattered for you all. I'm working in circles and opening up three circles, yeah, with points, 3 points on each. So this top one, then, let me line this up in my head, make sure I get it right too. Oh, goodness. Yes. In Mark 6, 2 to 6, you will have everyone there reacting with emotions. And twice these emotions are going to be what the people who are his fatherland, his relatives, the people of his own, what they do. And the third one will be what he does. So it's not a pure three where they're all about the same thing, but it is, and is building from their one people. They're under one father, and yet there's a big difference between them. And that's Mark's point in the story. And I love the way these words come out, Oh, if I can find the one. Yes, there it is. Because the first one, it really isn't so good in our English. In verse 2, it says, hearing him, many were astonished. And that's fine. The word astonished is fine. In the word in the Greek, which is explaisonta, it can mean that, but you can actually hear an English word in explaisonta. And we do it all the time when we don't like something and we want it to go away. We explaisonta it, we explain it. So the first thing they do is they begin to give excuses for why they don't really need to listen to him, which is what you see happen next, right? So astonished is fine, but it's like what they are is they just won't admit he is who he is. They're explainers. And you know how explainers are. They're like scoffers, right? Doesn't matter what you say, they explain it. Also, they can know everything. It's kind of a Gnostic, a knowledge worshiping trait. So they begin explaining. Then the second one, offended, you can hear it here too. They escandalizanta. I'll say it again more slowly. They get scandalizantized. You hear it? And they're scandalized. So they go from explaining him to that guy's a jerk. And Jesus is kind of like, again, coming home with the football trophy. It should be. Like it's his own place. And he's succeeding as a man of God. They explain it away and they're bothered by it. And then what does he do? Because they just won't believe, it's ethaumazen. And you can hear he's amazed. Ethaumazen. No, he's amazed. And there's a lot of commentary from the fathers and other theologians. "Wow, what does it mean? He's amazed. How is he amazed? The simple answer is like becoming a man, he did something God can't do. And he did it by not doing it in such a way that it wouldn't get undone. That is, he veiled his glory. He stopped having his glory and became a man. Like God can't do that, but he did it. And he did it in order to enjoy being a man and to save us. And in that process, there's moments in his life where there are surprises because though the Father has written all the days in his book, and though Jesus in the uh, distant, whatever economy of the Trinity has no fear of what shall come, it's like an open world game to him where every decision is sort of a free one and he doesn't quite know what's coming and he hasn't seen everything. He's only read everything and believed everything. And so at a certain point, the fact that they're all saying, we don't even like you, he feels it in his heart. As a man, he's kind of like, and when you have that feeling as a man, what do? Well, he moves on and teaches somewhere else. Yeah. I think that's a common feeling. Humans have that feeling, right? And Jesus has it perfectly. Right. So that's the big three that runs the story of again, Jesus comes home in power. They explain it away, and they're upset by it. And he marvels and moves on to where he will move in a circle from congregation to congregation, effectively teaching the word he's come to teach. Now, inside of all that packaging, there's this whole bit about his family, which is just super cool in more than one way. But to get there, I think we have to open up the package of Mary a touch. Um, if you do spend any time on the internet, on X, what used to be Twitter, which is a place for news, you'll find that Roman Catholic apologists are quite active there. The Protestant hate is unavoidable. It's cruel. It's quite something. I'll just quote. I've been called personally. I am the biggest Protestant hack on the internet. I'll put that on my diploma next time I get one. That sounds awesome. The biggest Protestant hack on the internet. Anyway, they're out there in droves telling everyone that Catholicism is the only Christianity and is the only hope for America. And people are listening. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, frankly. But the part where you have to worship Mary, that's really bad. It's called blasphemy. It's totally wrong. And yet, if you say that, then they will say a bunch of things like you hate Mary and blah, blah, blah. And Mary's not the mother of God. You get this whole other side where people are like, Mary is not the mother of God. And you get in these arguments that are like, well, no, technically she gave birth to God. I mean, it was impossible. We all know this. It's a miracle. And Jesus did it, not her, but like it happened.
Why do we have to say she's not the mother of God? What we should not do is pray to her. What we should not do is worship her. And what I think now, I think forever, based on Mark, we should not do is believe she had no other kids. Because the Holy Family in the Bible has more than one kid. A family in the Bible with one kid is cursed. It's just straight up. You can't avoid it. You're cursed. Now, this doesn't mean God hates you. It means you live in cursed times. We're all cursed. This planet sucks. It's filled with thorns and thistles and fires and all sorts of stuff. What's weird about our times, and if you want to be upset about that issue of childbearing as a blessing from God, what's weird about our times is that we intentionally curse ourselves by not having children on purpose. And that's bizarre. That's a people without a future, which is what our country feels like a lot of the time. Uh, But in Jesus' family, there were at least seven, if not, I'm going to guess 12. Good guess, right? Good number. They're listed here, though, again, as they talk about the carpenter, meaning Jesus has picked up a trade, and it's a dig at his dad, the son of Mary. So they know he's born from Mary, but they don't say the carpenter's son. So right there, they call him what happens if I say it on YouTube? The real word. There's a word. It just means your parents aren't married. We're not supposed to say it anymore. It's like the word for slow down in music. You can't say that one either. How weird is this? But he is being called this because it in fact does mean you came from a broken home. But did he? Well, that history is unknown. Where did all these other people come from? James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon. And before we go off into who they are and whose mother they were had them, um, don't miss that these are the same brothers who come to take him away because they don't believe he is who he says he is in this book. They think he's crazy. At the same time, others are saying he's demon possessed. These two guys, James and Jude, are some of the best evidence, actual evidence in history for the resurrection of Jesus because they're his brothers and they didn't believe in him. And then they write books about his resurrection after the fact. It's quite a thing, really. Um, it's quite a thing. James, the brother of Jesus, Jude, the brother of Jesus. They're here, but they don't believe in him, and they're called brothers. Now I'm gonna back up and fill another Mary nugget, and then kind of knock it down. It's not a straw man. This is their actual position. So, um, the perpetual virginity of Mary is necessary to maintain the perpetual innocence of Mary so that their teachings about Jesus being born sinless, because and only by Mary's latter assumption into heaven due to her own sinlessness, as part of their purgatorial nonsense, um, that entire thing insists not only that Mary never had another child, but if you go deep enough in the Latin, she never gave birth in the normal way. If he would come out through the canal, she would no longer be a virgin according to the Bible, according to Torah. So, of course, he had to come out differently so she could stay a virgin. And differently is like, again, Star Trek, beamed out, glowing baby, all that stuff, right? No blood, no spatter, no smell. Man of sorrows, the prophets say, but it's all clean in his cradle, right? So, Mary never having other children is part of maintaining this idea that Mary never really gave birth to Jesus as a way of maintaining a purgatorial trust in the sacrifice of the priest and the mass for the sake of the pope as a taxation system on the whole Catholic Church on earth, of which free Catholics simply don't participate in anymore. So if you're a Baptist, you're a Lutheran, whatever, we just Anglican, we're free Catholics. We don't pay those taxes. We shouldn't pray to Mary. There's others that do. There's debates about this. This text should settle it. And this text, I think, should settle that she has some kids. Maybe they're all from a former marriage. All of them? There's this other piece, and the argument goes that usually when they're going to talk about Jesus having brothers, it's going to be quoted from Matthew or Luke. And that's going to be on purpose so that the word sisters isn't there and that the word relatives isn't there. Because what they want you to do is believe that Mary never had any other kids because, oh, I just dropped it. Forgive me. It'll come back. Dear Jesus. Because brothers means Cousins. That's their argument. So that when Jesus' brothers come to him in any text in the Bible, they say, yes, but that means cousins, because it can. And if you go to the dictionary, you'll find that 4 definitions down or 3 definitions down, it can mean extended family. And guess what? In Matthew and Luke, I guess that's a fair argument, but not here, where they're barely delineated as named his 4 brothers. And then, just so you don't miss it, and his sisters. So now, again, Jesus, boys, Joseph, Mary, is getting to 12 hard? I don't think so. And his sisters. And then Jesus gets up and uses the word relatives to talk about the entire place, not just, you know, his cousins afar. So if you can put all those pieces together, what it means is that some way or other, Mary has a very large family. The Holy Family is a large family. Jesus has brothers and sisters. And if you want to throw another twist of Mark darkness into this, you could question, do they all get along all the time? Because my guess is most of us imagine that Jesus' home life was that mom and dad were great and everybody was at peace. I don't know how a man of sorrows grows up in that place. I know that Mary treasured up all these things in her heart. I know she thought he was crazy and wept at the foot of the cross, not knowing what he was doing. So, in all of this Holy Family picture, there's something for us to take home. And this is where, goodness, I'm past time. I'm going to take it though for Jesus' red letters, because that this bit about a prophet not without honor, except in his patrida, his homeland, his fatherland, amongst his own relatives, all who are connected to him. And that word is the sugenis sin, the with the same genes, is what that word means. And in his own house. This is the lesson for you as a Christian, that a Christian is not without honor except in your own fatherland and among your family and under your own roof. And there's a very clear reason for this. And that is that amongst those who know you, they know you. And so they will always give you the honor based on their knowledge of you. But people who don't know you as a Christian, I mean, today you walk out, they who don't know you, they don't know you, and they will give you the honor you deserve when you act like a Christian. They won't say last week you didn't act that way. They'll see what you did and they'll love it. But if you come home and there's a history, now it's much harder for the honor of today to stand. And Jesus just got to feel it that day. We all feel it every day. Man, woman, children, we all have a version of this, of not being welcome, of not knowing where we belong, of having those who ought to be for us be apparently most against us. We've all walked that path. And Jesus walked that path because it's ours. And he said, again, he went about the communities teaching. He went to those who would hear. So you have kind of 2 edges for this for wisdom. One is you don't have to stick your foot into dirt and filth. If you're with an extended relationship that isn't really a relationship and is destroying your life, you may leave it. You may walk right away from that non community. That said, those communities you're in and you can't get out of and you can't change by trying, you have to find a way to own them by faith. And then sometimes that means you're under someone, a boss you don't want to be under. Sometimes that means you're over someone, a worker who won't do his job. And if you think it's in your power to save this world, God will teach you you are powerless. Jesus owned the powerlessness of manhood that day at home. They should have all welcomed him, and they didn't, because he is living our life, our best life, filled with sorrow. And as the king who, again, to kind of bring it home and send it with you, gives to you this spirit that just sees things differently. I hope you wrote some stuff down today. If you took some notes, review them later, they'll help you. Being a reader will enlighten you. And the wisdom of God is power. But it's not like a magic stick. It's not like I just say, do this, and then it all works out. What we're doing is we're eating every week, or we're drinking from a font that is pure, or as pure as I can get it out of my flesh. Right? And you're here to hear me and call back what I said so that God will judge us rightly according to his word. Right. So from there, walk at liberty. It's Epiphany. The Son of God has revealed himself as King, risen from the dead, and you are his own. When he comes again, you are his own now. In Jesus' name, amen. Please rise for prayer.